Sir, hold up. Kill the engine.
I can't do that. Patient's unstable. We're mid-transport.
Step away from the ambulance right now.
Officer, please, check my ID. He's crashing.
Hands behind your back. Don't argue with me.
You're stopping me from saving his life.
The ambulance lights were still spinning when the handcuffs clicked shut. It was 2:17 a.m. at the border checkpoint, diesel fumes hanging in the cold air, a cardiac monitor still echoing faintly from the open rig. A man trained to save lives stood frozen as a federal officer tightened his grip. The patient inside was stabilized. The danger had passed. But for the paramedic outside, the real crisis was just beginning. Stories like this disappear unless they're witnessed carefully. Stay with this one not for outrage but for understanding, because what unfolded that night wasn't just a mistake. It was a system revealing itself, one decision at a time. The night is already moving when the call comes in, not chaotic focused, the kind of urgency that doesn't scream, because screaming wastes oxygen. The ambulance cuts through the desert highway with its lights on but siren deliberately muted, a protocol drilled into every emergency responder who works near federal checkpoints. Sirens escalate. Sirens provoke. Border zones are different. Rules here don't flex for panic. Inside the rig, the air smells of antiseptic and hot plastic. The cardiac monitor throws green lines across its screen, each blip a fragile promise. The patient is semi-conscious, chest rising unevenly, sweat soaking through his collar. The paramedic kneels low, braced against the vehicle's sway, fingers steady despite the speed. Years of training guide him more than thought ever could. Airway, breathing, circulation. Again, pressure's dropping. The EMT says quietly from the bench. I see it, the paramedic replies, already adjusting the foreflow. His voice is calm, always calm. That calm has been tested in freeway pileups, apartment fires, overdoses in locked bathrooms. Calm is not personality, it's discipline. The driver's voice crackles over the intercom. Checkpoint in 2 minutes. The words land differently than any other update. Not fear calculation. The paramedic glances at the clock, mounted above the rear doors. 2:14 a.m. Border Patrol policy requires ambulances to stop unless waved through. Medical exemptions exist, but they're discretionary, dependent on judgment, on mood, on who's standing under the floodlights tonight. The patient groans. The monitor stutters. Stay with me, the paramedic says, leaning closer, letting the man hear him. You're doing fine. We're almost there. Almost where? A hospital, yes, but first, a gate that doesn't care how close someone is to dying. The ambulance slows. Tires crunch over gravel. The desert opens into a harsh white glow as floodlights snap into view. The checkpoint rises out of the dark like machinery without a face, concrete barriers, steel beams, cameras that never blink. The kind of place designed to stop movement, not save lives. The vehicle rolls to a halt. The engine idles. Time stretches. A Border Patrol officer approaches, boots slow, deliberate. His hand rests near his belt, not threatening, not relaxed. Neutral. Neutral can be dangerous. Neutral means nothing personal. Neutral means procedure. The back doors swing open before the officer reaches the cab. We've got a critical patient, the paramedic calls out, credentials already clipped to his chest, visible under the light. Hypotensive, cardiac complications. We need to proceed. The officer doesn't respond immediately. He steps closer, eyes flicking not to the patient, but to the paramedic. A pause, not confusion. Assessment. Who's in charge here? The officer asks. I am, the paramedic says. His tone doesn't rise to meet authority. It doesn't need to. We're en route to County General, stopped per protocol. The officer glances toward the cab, then back again. You're required to shut the engine off. With respect, the paramedic replies, we can't. Patient's unstable. Every minute matters. The word respect doesn't land as intended. The officer's posture shifts just slightly. A recalibration. Authority being tested, or perceived to be. You don't get to decide that, the officer says. His voice is clipped now. Trained, step away from the vehicle. The EMT freezes. The patient coughs weakly. I need you to look at him, the paramedic says, gesturing toward the stretcher. I need you to follow instructions. The officer interrupts. No raised voice, no anger, certainty, the most dangerous tone of all. The paramedic hesitates, not out of defiance, but conflict. Training pulls him one way, command pulls another. This is the fracture point. The moment where two systems collide and only one is allowed to win. I'm a licensed paramedic, he said carefully. Here are my credentials. We're protected under. The officer doesn't take the ID. He doesn't look at it. Instead, he reaches for his radio. The desert is silent, except for the engine's low hum and the faint, irregular beep of the monitor. Each second stretches thinner than the last. Step away from the ambulance, the officer repeats. The paramedic exhales, slowly. He steps back not because he agrees, but because the patient doesn't have time for this to escalate. Compliance is damage control. The officer moves closer now. Close enough that the floodlights cast a hard shadow across the paramedic's face. Turn around, he says. What? The word slips out before the paramedic can stop it. Turn. Around. The EMT takes a step forward. Officer, this isn't. Hands behind your back. Silence. Even the monitor seems to pause. The cuffs come out smoothly. No rush. No struggle. Metal clicks against bone with a sound too final for the hour. As they close, the patient inside the ambulance cries out a weak, confused sound, like someone waking from a nightmare without knowing why. The officer doesn't look back. At 2:17 a.m., under floodlights that never blink, a man trained to save lives is no longer allowed to touch one. Detention doesn't announce itself. It settles in quietly, like dust. A command here, a formality there, words delivered without explanation, because explanation suggests doubt. At the checkpoint, authority doesn't argue, it instructs. Step forward, feet apart. Do not turn around. Each sentence is short, trimmed of emotion, engineered to move a body through space. The paramedic complies because resistance would only contaminate the moment further. His wrists are already burning where the cuffs bite too tight. The metal cold against skin still warm from adrenaline. Somewhere behind him, the ambulance doors close with a hollow thud. The sound lands heavier than it should. The officer keys his radio. Unit 7-3. We've got one detained. EMS personnel. Need supervisor confirmation. No name. No explanation. Just a classification. The paramedic listens carefully, not for what's said, but for what isn't. No mention of the patient. No urgency in the voice. The emergency has already been edited out of the story. Officer, he says, slow and measured. The patient is critical. I need to get back inside. The officer doesn't turn. He adjusts his stance instead, widening it slightly, anchoring himself to the ground. This is posture taught in training videos, how to project control without escalation. That's not your concern anymore, the officer replies. Not your concern anymore. The words land with bureaucratic finality. The paramedic blinks once, then again. His mind runs through protocols automatically, searching for something solid. Federal checkpoints operate under Title 8 authority. Border Patrol agents have expanded discretion within the zone. Detention thresholds are different here, lower, fuzzier. You've got my credentials, the paramedic says. You can verify them in seconds. The officer finally turns, face unreadable under the glare of the lights. I'll decide what gets verified. There it is. Not anger, not hatred, decision. Another agent approaches, younger, eyes flicking between the cuffs and the ambulance. He hesitates, just briefly. Sir, the younger agent says, quieter. They already waved the patient through. The paramedic twists his head slightly, straining to see past his shoulder. He catches a glimpse of the ambulance pulling away, red lights fading into the dark, siren still silent. The patient is alive, for now. Relief flickers, then collapses inward. Relief doesn't cancel what's happening, it sharpens it. So we're clear, the paramedic says, forcing steadiness into his voice. There's no longer an exigent circumstance. I can be released. The officer exhales through his nose, almost amused. You don't understand how this works. He steps closer, lowering his voice just enough to make it private. Out here, we verify first. We ask questions later. The younger agent looks away. The paramedic feels something shift, not fear, not anger, but recognition. This isn't about suspicion. It's about hierarchy, about reminding someone which badge carries weight under these lights. A supervisor arrives 15 minutes later. Border Patrol green uniform, silver bars on the collar. He doesn't rush. No one ever does once the patient is gone. What's the situation? The supervisor asks. The officer responds crisply, reciting facts stripped of tone. Ambulance stopped. Non-compliance with checkpoint protocol. Subject argumentative. Investigation ongoing. The paramedic listens as his own actions are flattened into bullet points. He wants to interrupt to correct the shape of the story, but he knows better now. Stories here harden quickly. Once set, they resist revision. Sir, he says when there's a pause, I've been a paramedic for 11 years. I've worked mass casualties, active scenes. I followed protocol. I need to be released and allowed to return to duty. The supervisor studies him for a moment, really studies him. The cuffs. The uniform. The calm that hasn't broken yet. Why were your sirens off? The supervisor asks. Border regulations. The paramedic answers immediately. Section 287 guidelines. We're trained to reduce escalation near checkpoints. The supervisor nods slowly, like he's processing something complex, but his next words undo that illusion. That's a policy, he says, not a guarantee. The phrase hangs in the air. Policy versus discretion. Training versus authority. The imbalance reveals itself not through force, but through definition. They move the paramedic to a holding area, a prefabricated structure just off the main lane. Inside, the lights buzz faintly. A folding chair. A metal desk. No windows. The door closes with a click that echoes louder than it should. Time becomes strange here. Unmeasured. The paramedic asks for a phone call. The answer is not yet. He asks for his cuffs loosened. Later. Each request is acknowledged without commitment, a verbal holding pattern. Through the thin walls, he hears radios chirp. Codes exchanged. Life moving on without him. The irony settles in slowly. The patient survived the night. The emergency ended. But for him it didn't end. It migrated. From a body on a stretcher to a body in a chair. From flashing lights to fluorescent hum. From saving a life to defending his own humanity against a system that speaks in calm voices and leaves no room for appeal. Authority doesn't shout here. It speaks softly and assumes you'll stay where it puts you. Morning doesn't arrive here with sunlight. It arrives with flickering fluorescence and the scrape of a clipboard against metal. The holding room smells faintly of disinfectant layered over stale coffee, the kind brewed hours ago and forgotten. Time has thickened. The paramedic doesn't know exactly how long he's been sitting, only that the adrenaline is gone now, leaving behind a hollow calm that feels almost dangerous. A folder lands on the desk. Detention log. His name spelled correctly, which surprises him. The date. The time. 2:17 a.m. Failure to comply. The phrase stares back at him, clean and confident, as if it's always belonged there. He reads it once, then again. This is how reality shifts, not all at once, but line by line. The officer enters without ceremony, carrying more papers. Incident report. Supplemental narrative. The officer doesn't look hostile. He looks tired. That unsettles the paramedic more than anger ever could. Tired men don't question what they're doing. They rely on habit. Take a look, the officer says. Let me know if there's anything you wanted to add. Add. As if this were collaborative. The paramedic scans the report. The language is careful, almost elegant. Subject became argumentative. Scene safety compromised. Detention conducted per standard operating procedure. The words don't lie outright. They reshape. They remove urgency, flatten intent, sand down context until what's left feels inevitable. He looks up. This isn't accurate. The officer shrugs slightly. That's how it was perceived. Perceived. Another word that shifts weight without admitting it's doing so. The paramedic thinks back, replaying the night in fragments. The patient's pulse slipping. The pause before the cuffs came out. The way the officer never once looked at the stretcher. He searches for the moment control slipped away, some wrong word, some misstep. He can't find it. That's what troubles him most. If there were a mistake, he could own it, learn from it, move on. But this feels different. He hands the papers back untouched. I won't sign this. The officer nods as if he expected that. Your choice. Outside these walls, the world is already responding. The paramedic doesn't know it yet, but his shift supervisor has been awake since dawn, filing internal complaints, pulling GPS logs, confirming dispatch timestamps. EMS policy is clear about medical exemptions. County legal counsel has been notified. Emails move faster than sirens ever could. Inside, none of that reaches him. He's escorted back to the holding room. The door closes again. The buzz of the lights returns. Silence stretches, not empty, but heavy with things unsaid. This is the psychological toll no one trains you for. Not fear of harm, not anger, disbelief, the slow erosion of certainty. He spent a career trusting systems dispatch, hospitals, protocols. Systems save lives because they're predictable, but this one feels fluid, shaped by who's holding the pen. Hours pass, or minutes, it's hard to tell. A different officer enters this time. Younger. More careful. He sets a small cup of water on the desk. Just so you know, he says quietly, your coworkers are asking questions. The paramedic nods once. Gratitude flickers, but he keeps it contained. Emotion here feels like a liability. What happens next? He asks. The officer hesitates. Depends. On what? Evidence? Policy? Or alignment? The answer comes later, quietly, almost accidentally. The supervisor returns, holding a tablet instead of a folder. He doesn't sit. We reviewed the body camera footage, he says. The paramedic feels his chest tighten. Not relief. Not yet. There's an angle. The supervisor continues, choosing his words carefully. One of the cameras picked up the patient monitor audio. Faint, but audible. A pause. The room hums. The timestamps don't fully align with the report. The supervisor looks at him now, really looks, for the first time since the cuffs closed. We're flagging it for secondary review. It's not an apology. Not even an admission, but it's something else. Fracture. A hairline crack in a narrative that had seemed sealed shut. The paramedic exhales slowly, the way he does before delivering difficult news to a family. He knows this moment isn't resolution. It's just the end of silence. And silence, he's learning, has a cost. The footage doesn't explode into the world, it seeps. First, it's reviewed internally twice, then a third time with audio enhancement. Headphones on. Volume raised. The faint, irregular beeping of a cardiac monitor becomes unmistakable once you're listening for it. Time-stamped. Synced. Alive. The sound shouldn't be there according to the report, but it is. And once heard, it can't be unheard. That's how evidence works when it finally finds daylight. Not dramatic. Definitive. Legal counsel enters quietly, not the kind that grandstands, but the kind that asks for documents and timelines and keeps a running list of statutes in the margins. Civil rights attorneys with experience in federal cases know the terrain well. Qualified immunity, Federal Tort Claims Act, Bivens limitations. These doctrines aren't slogans, they're obstacles. Tall ones, designed to slow momentum, to exhaust plaintiffs before truth ever reaches a courtroom. But footage changes the math. The paramedic is released without ceremony. No charges filed. No explanation offered. Just a return of personal items and a signature acknowledging receipt. Outside, the sun feels too bright. Like it hasn't earned the right to be normal yet. He doesn't go home. He goes straight to the station. His coworkers don't clap. They don't cheer. They nod. One of them grips his shoulder a little longer than necessary. That's how support looks in places where emotions are usually folded away. Within days, formal complaints escalate beyond internal affairs. Federal oversight inquiries are triggered when Civil Rights Council submits notice under Title 42. Language sharpens. Deadlines appear. Agencies that move slowly by design begin to shift, not because they want to, but because they have to. The officer is reassigned first. Administrative. Temporary, a word that suggests neutrality but signals precaution. Then he's interviewed again, this time with lawyers present. His answers grow shorter, more careful. Silence replaces certainty. Media attention follows, but not in a rush. No viral clip. No shouting panels. Instead, local investigative reporters publish timelines. Exact times. Exact policies. A paramedic detained at 2:17 a.m. A patient monitor audible on Bodycam at 2:19. An ambulance released at 2:21. Specificity is harder to argue with than outrage. The paramedic agrees to speak publicly once. Just once. No rally. No podium. A quiet press room with a single microphone and too many cameras. He wears his uniform. I followed my training, he says. His voice is steady, but it carries weight now. I did what I was taught to do, protect my patient first. I'm not here to attack anyone. I'm here because this shouldn't happen again. He doesn't mention race. He doesn't mention bias. He doesn't need to. The facts do that work on their own. Behind the scenes, the case grows teeth. Depositions. Subpoenas. Policy manuals requested going back 10 years. Training curricula examined line by line. Who taught discretion, how it was framed, who signed off. This is where systems begin to resist, not loudly, but bureaucratically. Motions to dismiss, jurisdictional challenges, language arguing inevitability rather than choice. But each motion meets a counter. Each delay sharpens public scrutiny. Responsibility starts to travel upward. Not just the officer, the supervisor, the training unit, the agency's interpretation of medical exemptions, questions that can't be answered with on-scene judgment anymore. Weeks pass. Then months. When the number becomes public, it lands without spectacle, filed in federal court. A civil claim seeking damages for unlawful detention, civil rights violations, emotional distress, and professional harm. $27 million. The figure isn't about enrichment. Everyone involved knows that. It's about gravity, about signaling scale. about forcing attention from rooms that usually don't feel consequences unless they're written in ink with enough zeros. The paramedic reads the headline alone. No satisfaction. No triumph. Just a quiet understanding settling in. This isn't personal anymore. It's structural. And once a structure is exposed to light, it either changes or cracks. Wider. Resolution doesn't arrive with a verdict read aloud or a room full of cameras. It arrives in memos, in revised language, in sentences that used to end with discretion and now end with shall. Accountability in this case speaks softly. The lawsuit moves through the system the way all serious things do, slowly, deliberately, stripping emotion away until only facts remain. By the time it settles, the paramedic has already returned to work. His first shift back is uneventful. No dramatic calls. No emergencies that test him the way that night did. Just routine transports, paperwork, the familiar rhythm of service. His hands still know what to do. His body remembers before his mind catches up. What's changed is harder to see. At border checkpoints across the region, policy bulletins are circulated. Emergency medical exemptions are clarified, rewritten with unmistakable language. Ambulances in active transport are no longer subject to discretionary detention absent clear, articulable threat. Body camera review protocols are updated. Supervisors are now required to respond immediately to any detention involving medical personnel. These changes aren't announced publicly. They don't trend. But they exist and they matter. Training modules are revised next. Scenarios added, not hypotheticals, but case-based instruction. A paramedic, a patient, a checkpoint. Trainees are asked not what they can do, but what they should do. The difference is subtle. It's also everything. The officer at the center of it all is disciplined quietly, reassigned, required to complete additional training. His career isn't ended. Neither is it untouched. This is how institutions protect themselves, by correcting without confessing. Some call it insufficient. Others call it restraint. The truth sits somewhere in between. The paramedic doesn't follow the officer's outcome closely. He's learned that proximity to resolution doesn't guarantee peace. What stays with him isn't the person, it's the moment. The click of the cuffs. The sound of the ambulance pulling away. Those details surface sometimes without warning, usually in quiet spaces. The settlement closes the case. $27 million. A figure makes headlines once, then fades. Money can quantify harm for a court, but it can't translate experience. It can't restore the version of certainty he had before that night, the belief that doing everything right would be enough. Still, the precedent stands. Civil rights attorneys cite the case in filings. Training academies reference it without naming it. Somewhere down the line, an ambulance slows at a checkpoint and doesn't stop. A supervisor waves it through. A patient reaches a hospital seconds earlier than they might have. No one traces that moment back to him. He doesn't need them to. Justice, he's come to understand, isn't an event. It's a process. It's cumulative. It works best when it's boring enough to be ignored and precise enough to endure. On his last shift of the week, he finishes a routine transport and steps outside into early morning light. The air is cool. Ordinary. He stands for a moment longer than necessary, listening to the engine idle, feeling the ground under his feet. In the end, accountability didn't roar. It adjusted. It revised. It learned slowly, reluctantly, and it only moved because, for a few hours under unblinking lights, someone was forced to stand still inside it.